Dear friends, English literature, Elizabethan and Jacobean drama, The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. Brief questions with answers. Brief questions 99 to 175. Question 99. How are the impulses of a man who is not moved by the harmony of sweet sounds? Answer. The impulses of a man who is not moved by the sweet sounds of music are inert and sluggish as the time of night is. Question 100. What are the feelings of a man who is not moved by the sweet sound of music? Answer. The feelings of this kind of man are as dark as the kingdom of death. Or, the feelings of this kind of man are as dark as that of a dead man. Question 101. What does Bassanio say when Portia demands to see the wedding ring? Answer. Swearing by his honor, Bassanio says that he has given the ring to the doctor of laws who has saved the life of Antonio, his dearest friend. Question 102. Why does Antonio blame himself for the quarrel between Bassanio and Portia? Answer. Because Bassanio has to give the ring given by Portia to the lawyer who defended Antonio in the court. Question 103. What does Bassanio swear to do? Answer. Bassanio swears that he will no more break the oath with Portia. Question 104. Who discloses the secret behind the disguise in the court? Answer. It is Portia who discloses that Portia was the doctor and Nerissa her clerk. Question 105. What better news does Portia convey to Antonio? Answer. Portia conveys the news of his 3 ships' safe return to the port with rich cargo. Question 106. What is the time when the play comes to an end? Answer. The play comes to an end when the day is about to break up. Question 107. What does Gratiano say at the end of the drama? Answer. Gratiano promises that he will not be afraid of anything more than keeping Nerissa's ring safely with him. Question 108. Who is the hero of the play, The Merchant of Venice? Answer. Antonio is the hero of the play, The Merchant of Venice. Question 109. What kind of man is Antonio? Answer. Antonio is the kindest man, an unwearied spirit in courtesies, and the most reliable friend. Question 110. What kind of melancholy does he suffer from in the opening of the play? Answer. It is a kind of unexplainable melancholy he is suffering from in the beginning. Question 111. How rich is Antonio? Answer. Antonio is a rich man who has many seagoing merchant ships. Question 112. Why does people love Antonio? Answer. Antonio is a large-hearted man and lends money with no interest. Question 113. Why does Shylock hate Antonio? Answer. Antonio makes his business tough by saving people from his exploitation and for calling him a car dog in the public. Question 114. Why is Antonio called a Brutus of the cunning house and exchange? Answer. Antonio is so called for his lofty moral sense and purity in the financial affairs. Question 115. How does Antonio evaluate friendship? Answer. Antonio values friendship so much that he does not hesitate to take the risk of his life to help his friend Bassanio. Question 116. Why does Antonio hate Shylock? Answer. Shylock imposes unbearable rate of interest on the poor people while they borrow money from him. Question 117. Do you find any fault in the character of Antonio? Answer. The greatest flaw in the character of Antonio is his religious intolerance. Question 118. Does the relation between Antonio and Shylock represent the bitter relationship between the Christian and Jew in the 18th century? Answer. Yes. In the 18th century, the Christian and the Jew. Question 119. What is Antonio's attitude to money? Answer. Antonio does not hanker after money and is indifferent to gain or loss in the most cases. Question 120. Where does Shylock live? Answer: Shylock is a Jewish moneylender who lives in a Christian city in Venice. Question 121. What is Shylock by religion? Answer: Shylock is a Jew by religion. Question 122. What is Shylock's attitude to money? Answer: Shylock loves money only. So he is greedy and earns money by charging unusual rate of interest. Question 123. Why does Shylock hate Christians? Answer: Shylock hates the Christians because being influenced by the ancient hatred of the Jew for the Christians. Question 124. Do you find any example of Shylock's hatred for the Christians? Answer: Shylock says in Scene 3 of Act 1 that he refuses to dine with Bassanio, although he is ready to share business with him. Question 125. How much does Shylock love money? Answer: for money, Shylock can sacrifice everything, even his daughter. Question 126. Why does not Shylock charge interest on the loan for Antonio? Answer: because to him, vengeance is more important than earning. Question 124. Do you think that Shylock is more cunning than cruel? Answer: no, Shylock becomes either cunning or cruel, whatever the situation demands. Question 128. Why does Shylock devise the bond? Answer: Shylock is both hypocrite and villain, so he devises the bond to take revenge if chances come, and avoid it, calling it a merry sport. Question 129. How do we understand that Shylock is bent upon taking the flesh? Answer: when Bassanio offers Shylock double or triple of the money Antonio has borrowed, he refuses the proposal and remains stick to the bond. Question 130. How does Shylock represent his tribe? Answer: Shylock wants to return the persecution the Christians have heaped upon them by taking vengeance upon a Christian. Question 131. Why is Shylock determined to take flesh from Antonio's body? Answer: Shylock tries to return the atrocity done to the man of his race by the Christians by taking flesh from the body of the leader of the Christians. Question 132. May we call Shylock a leader of the oppressed people? Answer: by stressing upon taking the flesh from Antonio's body, Shylock silently protests against racial injustice. Question 133. Do you find any human side in the character of Shylock? Answer: we find a human aspect in Shylock when we observe in him love for his daughter and even for his servant Lancelot. Question 134. Do you feel pity for Shylock in any way? Answer: at the end of the trial, we find Shylock deprived of everything, property and religion, so we cannot but feel pity for him. Question 135. Who is Bassanio? Answer: Bassanio is the hero of the Cascade story and is the most intimate friend of Antonio and husband of Portia. Question 136. What kind of man is Bassanio? Answer: Bassanio is a young prodigal who is often in need of money. Question 137. Why does Bassanio want to marry Portia? Answer: at first, Bassanio wants to marry Portia to gain financial means to pay back his debt to Antonio, but throughout the course of the story, he falls in love with her. Thus, he wants to marry her for her because she is rich as well as he loves her. Question 138. Why does Bassanio require a loan? Answer: because he wants to participate in the lottery for the hand of the rich young Portia, but he has no money to go to Belmont where Portia lives. Question 139. How can you prove that Bassanio is an ardent lover of poetic nature? Answer: the very description that Portia is fairer than the world, has sunny locks of her, proves that he is a man of poetic nature. Question 140. What is the difference between Bassanio and Antonio? Answer. Antonio is a reserved and melancholy type of man, while Bassanio is gay, friendly, and optimistic man. Question 141. Is Bassanio a shallow man? Answer. No. Bassanio's speech before choosing a casket and his comment over law and his dislike of cowards are enough to consider him as a person of qualities. Question 142. Evaluate Bassanio as a man. Answer. Bassanio's sincere friendship, his anxiety for Antonio's release from the bond, and his true love for Portia make him a man of genuine humanity. Question 143. Who is Gratiano? Answer. Gratiano is the friend to Antonio and to Bassanio and a man of wit and humor in the comedy in The Merchant of Venice. Question 144. What role does Gratiano play in the play? Answer. Gratiano is the source of humor in the play and makes the scenes lively by his careless talk, unadmired by both Antonio and Bassanio. Question 145. How Gratiano's talk is evaluated by Bassanio? Answer. Bassanio compares Gratiano's talk to 2 grains of wheat in a large heap of chaff or straw. Question 146. What is the nature of Gratiano's wit? Answer. Gratiano's wit is ironical and sarcastic. Question 147. Quote an ironic wit from his speech. Answer. When Portia, in the guise of a young lawyer, pleads for Bassanio, Gratiano calls her an upright judge and then a second Daniel. Question 148. Point out the speeches of Gratiano in which we find his wisdom. Answer. His speech on the philosophy of love and on the necessity of laughter bear testimony to his wisdom. Question 149. Who is Lancelot Gavo? Answer. Lancelot Gavo is the servant in the house of Shylock and performs the role of a clown in the play The Merchant of Venice. Question 150. What kind of man is Lancelot Gavo? Answer. Lancelot Gavo is a kind-hearted fellow who feels the pricks of conscience while he flees from Shylock's house. Question 151. How do you evaluate the Prince of Morocco? Answer. The Prince of Morocco is a typical barbarian, proud, arrogant, and vain in nature. Question 152. What is your opinion about the Prince of Aragon? Answer. A typical Spanish Don is the Prince of Aragon, who is steeped in the prejudice and pride and contempt for the common people. Question 153. What is the role of Tubal in the play? Answer. Tubal, a typical Jew, mean suspicious, and malicious, served as an associate confederate of Shylock. Question 154. Who is Salerio? Answer. A sycophantic friend of Antonio is Salerio, who feels for him in his melancholy. Question 155. Who is Solanio? Answer. Solanio is a merchant friend of Antonio and he always moves with Salerio in pair and loves Antonio heartily. Question 156. Who is Lorenzo? Answer. Lorenzo is a young Christian, romantic and witty who represents the adventurous young man of those days. Question 157. How does Lorenzo win the heart of Jessica? Answer. By his refined artistic and adventurous spirit, Lorenzo easily captures the heart of Jessica. Question 158. What is the special quality of Lorenzo? Answer. Lorenzo is endowed with the easy gift of bewitching omen by which he earns the confidence of Jessica and of Portia, who keeps her house and property in the charge while she goes to Venice. Question 159. Who is Portia? Answer. Portia is the central character of the play The Merchant of Venice, around whom the entire action of the play moves. Question 160. What are Portia's qualities? Answer. Portia is witty and humorous, wise and intelligent, rich and aristocratic, and above all, a sympathetic young lady. Question 161. Where do we find Portia at her best? Answer. In the court of Venice, Portia is at the top of her intelligence when she secures the life of Antonio from the clutches of Shylock. Question 162. What type of woman is Portia? As Portia is an ideal woman with a sympathetic heart from which milk of humanity always flows to everyone who needs. Question 163. Is Portia obedient to her father? Answer: yes, Portia remains obedient to her father's advice to choose her husband. Question 164. Why does Portia disguise herself as a lawyer? Answer: in those days, women were not allowed to act as lawyers. Question 165. Does Portia do injustice to Shylock? Answer: no, Portia begs Antonio to be kind to Shylock in the distribution of his property. Question 166. What is the role of Nerissa in the drama The Merchant of Venice? Answer: Nerissa acts as the waiting maid or the confidant of Portia in the play. Question 167. How does Nerissa disguise herself in the trial scene? Answer: Nerissa disguises herself as the clerk to the lawyer. Question 168. How intelligent was Nerissa? Answer: Nerissa was undoubtedly very intelligent, as her advice in different times to Portia testifies to her intelligence. Question 169. How does Nerissa play her part in the trial scene? Answer: Nerissa rises equal to the occasion and admirably plays her part. Question 170. Did Nerissa marry the man she loved? Answer: yes, she married Gratiano, whom she loved. Question 171. What is Nerissa by race? Answer: what is Jessica by race? Answer: Jessica is a Jewish by race. Question 172. How is Jessica opposite to Portia? Answer: Jessica marries Lorenzo, going against her father's will, while Portia marries Bassanio, obeying her father's will. Question 173. What is Jessica by nature? Answer: Jessica is gay and irresponsible by nature. Question 174. Do you find any poetic sensibility in Jessica? Answer: yes, she loves music and the beauty of nature. Question 175. How does Jessica contribute to the plot of the play? Answer: Jessica contributes much to the romantic atmosphere of the play. Thank you friends for watching my video.